Señoras y señores, es un honor darles la bienvenida a la conferencia de hoy. El tema será los principios teóricos de la lingüística queer, con un enfoque en el caso de las plataformas en líneas mexicanas. My name is Lina Benyes, and I'm a student of Drama Studies and Spanish and Latin American Studies, and I'm one of the student organizers of the Lingua A lecture series. Tonight, I'm very, very pleased to be able to welcome Ernesto Cuba as our guest speaker and multilingual linguist to the virtual Leibniz University of Hanover. Mr. Cuba graduated from the Pontifical Catholic University of Peru, his home country, in which the Peruvian government asked him to develop a guideline for gender-equal language. Together with Silvia Riviera, he co-founded the Círculo de Lingüística Feminista Indisciplinades, which brings together specialists on feminist linguistics from Latin America. Nowadays, he's a PhD candidate in the field of Hispanic linguistics with a focus on transgender language use at the City University of New York. He has published multiple papers on political linguistics in Peruvian indigenous languages, sexism in language, and inclusive language, as Spanish is still a language driven by the generic masculine. Mr. Cuba will hold his lecture in English, pero también me gustaría darles la bienvenida en español porque somos estudiantes de las lenguas alemán, inglés y español. And so, without further ado, I would really like to hand over to our guest speaker, Mr. Ernesto Cuba.
Thank you so much. Muchas gracias por la invitación. I just want to be sure everything is working well here. Okay, muchas gracias. So I'm gonna talk today about two things. The first part is what I call the theoretical tenets of queer linguistics. So this is the table of content of today. So I'm gonna define what is queer linguistics. The first tenets, and I call and I label tenets because not necessarily all of these is applied for, is exclusive for queer subjects or queer communities. You can find these concepts along different topics in sociolinguistics and linguistic anthropology. But this is my proposal as to understand one of the fundamental aspects of queer linguistics. What are we talking when we talk about queer linguistics? So second, in lexicality, the first, performativity, we're gonna explore that. And the third, community of practice. It's very common to talk about performativity and lexicality when discussing queer linguistics, but not so much about community of practice. Again, this is my proposal, not necessarily, something written on a stone. Two examples. One is from YouTube, and the second is from Twitter. Belonging to communities of queer communities in Mexico. So I'm going to start with what is queer linguistics. So queer linguistics, as you can kind of infer by the name, it relies a lot on queer theory. So queer linguistics, and I'm quoting Mochenbacher, Heiko Mochenbacher, a German linguist who works a lot on these theoretical aspects of queer linguistics. Queer linguistics takes issue with all linguistic mechanisms that lead to heterosexuality being perceived as a naturalized norm, which in turn is to be destabilized and confronted with non-heteronormative alternatives. I'm sorry for my English, it's a bit rusty, but you understand. So the scope of queer linguistics, so one of the, people think, okay, so you're a linguist and you're queer, then you're doing queer linguistics, or you are going to explore a queer community, a group of friends who happen to be lesbians, or a community of transgender women. So then your approach is queer linguistics, but it doesn't work like that. It's more like the way that we, approach to our topics and to the community we study, instead of the definition of the studied community. Okay, so queer linguistics focuses on the discursive regimes governing all sexual identities and desires. And accordingly also has an obvious interest in studying the discursive formation of heterosexualities. So again, this is not exclusive only for LGBT populations, LGBT individuals, but it's also to see how, sexual identities are constructed in heterosexual communities and subjects. This section is going to be a pretty theoretical, and so I'm going to kind of like down my ideas on the second section, which is the cases of Mexican platforms. Okay, so don't worry if this is too abstract. And so queer linguistics and feminist linguistics. So again, so this is a quote from two of the most important authors discussing these topics, Mary Buchholz and Kira Hall. So they elaborate a lot about the relationship between sexuality and language, and also the relationship between identity and language. How does something, what is the relationship between expressing in a certain way, in a certain way, and also creating or performing an identity? So if I could put it in a sort of genealogy, I would say like queer linguistics is the kind of the daughter of feminist linguistics. It was more like the gender and language research started in the 70s, and elaborations based on queer theory in the 90s gave place to queer linguistics. So but it doesn't mean that these two concepts or like approaches are interchangeable. It doesn't, it's not like that. So I'm reading feminist linguistics is to language and gender as queer linguistics is to language and sexuality, a particular political and theoretical perspective on an area of intellectual inquiry. So again, it's a perspective, not not a community, LGBT community in this case. It follows that the queer linguistics is not simply the study of the language of queers. That's what I said. However, that term is defined. Any more than feminist linguistics is simply the study of the language of feminists, but that isn't interesting, but that's very interesting in itself. So this is just some background to for what follows. Okay, so here we go. Performativity. So this is maybe one of the most used concepts in queer theory, or the most famous one. So performativity has arrived to linguistics relatively late in comparison with other areas of academic research and intellectual spaces. So what you see is the first publication with a queer linguistics approach. This is again from Kira Hall and Anna Livia, editors of Queerly Phrased, Language, Gender, and Sexuality. And the introductory chapter is dedicated to the concept of performativity and, as they say, bringing it back to linguistics. I don't want to explore, the nitty gritty about how a performative is related to Austin, etc., because this is just an exploration. I really recommend this chapter to anybody wanting to do their research on queer linguistics as as part of their theoretical framework. But again, just to emphasize that this is the first publication and has many pieces that were very influential for the coming years. So talking about quoted and quoted people, Judith Butler, which is the rock star of queer theory, published in 1990, Gender Trouble. So this book was very influential, and here I quote one of her definitions of gender. So, and you can see, why I'm quoting Butler. I'm not like avoiding the linguistic aspect here, but I'm going to explain this in a moment. So gender is the repeated stabilization of the body, a set of repeated acts within a highly rigid regulatory frame that congeal over time to produce the appearance of substance of a natural sort of being. So why I'm quoting this? Because when I start reading about queer linguistics, I didn't have idea what queer theory was. It was in 2005, I think, when I was in Peru. Well, when I was in my college years, the first time that I read about queer theory or about somebody called Judith Butler was through this paper. So this paper was written, was published by Deborah Cameron in 1997. And this is very important. As I said, feminist linguistics has existed already since the 70s. So what is very important, this article, is because it's the first time that somebody, used the concept of performativity and included in their theoretical framework for studying gender and language. So when I was, younger, I was reading this paper. I was amazed because I never heard about. I was very young about doing research about the language of gay men, or in this case just straight men. Um, and I was very amazed about this idea of performativity. And then I started reading queer theory, being more familiar with the work of Judith Butler. So this paper is important again because it this word is very difficult, sorry, operationalized the concept of performativity for language and gender research, which is not a very easy task, but Deborah Cameron did it because she's a genius. um, so this whole this shift between working with certain approach to language and gender to a non-essentialist one is very well summarized in this quote from this article. I'm sorry, this is full of quotes, but I'm not saying something completely new. So I think it's better to present the ideas of the thinkers before putting my own before including my own voice. So whereas sociolinguistic traditionally assumes that people talk the way they do because of who they already are, the postmodernist approach suggests postmodernist approach, Judith Butler performativity suggests that people are who they are because of, among other things, the way they talk. This shifts the focus away from a simple cataloging of differences between men and women to a subtler and more complex inquiry into how people use linguistic resources to produce gender differentiation. So it goes the other way around. Instead of asking, so how men and women talk, is more like, well, how these linguistic resources or these traits, these words, these sounds construct, masculine or feminine identity. So it's the other way around. Yeah. So this is the repeated esthetization of the talk, of the language that is congealed and makes the appearance of substance. So that's what Deborah Cameron did in this article. It's a very, very recommended article. I'm not exaggerating when saying that it changed my life. So indexicality, a very, very famous concept too, more in linguistic anthropology, I think, than in, more classic linguistics. So the concept of indexicality has been discussed since many, many years. And I was very surprised while doing my literature review, to know that Michael Silverstein, who passed away recently, talked about gender, language, and ideology and indexicality without saying exactly indexicality since the 1980s. So yeah, so this is a concept that it didn't exactly, it's not exactly new, as new as queer theory, and has a long, trajectory too. So here I'm quoting and translating my own maestro, José del Valle, Ameriño Guede. So indexicality is the property that makes the value of an utterance lie not only in the literal meaning it contains, in the object or idea to which in general it refers, but in its capacity to point out elements of the context of the enunciation, to indicate social identities, and to build relationship between interlocutors. translation of the translation. In other words, when you hear somebody speaking, is there like, somebody saying something, is they are not only describing the reality, but also doing something else consciously or unconsciously, indexing some group of social meanings, some aspects of their identity or of the contextual meaning. I'm gonna put examples, and actually the second part of the presentation is all about indexicality. So don't worry, it's gonna be clear when I arrive to that moment. Also, indexing gender. So of course, this is another very influential piece, indexing gender of Eleanor Ox. So one of the things that Ox says is that, well, the relationship between language and gender very, very few times is direct. If you think about English, you have the personal pronouns and some lexical items like father, niece, or in Spanish you have a grammatical gender, but there are many, and also in German, but there are indirect ways to index gender, which is not like directly, which is going through another kind of social meaning. So I'm gonna read the first and less common of these ways to, index gender is the direct indexical relation, as when a personal pronoun or a key term indexes gender of a speaker and reference. The second relates gender to language through some social meaning indexed, such as acts, activities, and stances. In this second relation, certain social meanings are more central than others. This meaning, however, help to constitute other domains of social reality. So again, I'm going to explain this with examples in my own study in a moment. So yeah, so the centrality of this concept, the performativity and indexicality, I mean, you can see in the first and a very amazing publication of queer theory, queer linguistics in Brazilian Portuguese language. So this is from my colleague Rodrigo Borba, Discursos Transviados por una lingüística queer, por una lingüística queer. And the first part of the book is called Performative Indexicalities. And it has a translation from of a piece of Rusty Barrett, who's I'm going to talk about him in a moment. So again, these two concepts are very important. I'm not exaggerating when saying so. Community of practice is a very game changer in terms of language and gender theory, and is actually well, its origin is more like an inspiration from the same concept coined in the educational theory. So the community practice is understood as how the people, create knowledge in in groups or in teams. So Eker and McConnell adapt this concept to the language and gender theory in the early 90s. So in this paper, which that has the name start with think practically and look locally, they define community practice as an aggregate of people who come together around mutual engagement in a, I don't know how to pronounce that, so sorry, endeavor, ways of doing things, ways of talking, beliefs, values, power relations. In short, practices emerge in the course of this mutual endeavor. As a social construct, a community of practice is different from the traditional community, primarily because it is defined simultaneously, and this is very important, by its membership and by the practice in which that membership engage. So what they are, kind of making a contrast with. They are talking about the concept of speech communities. They are very, they are very clear about, there are some problems, or there are some limitations with the concept of speech community. But also I can add that it also makes some difference with the concept of social networks, of Milroy and Milroy. So what is very important here is that the centrality of practice. So instead of thinking a group of women are a community because they're women, a community of practice will ask, what is the common practice that they engage constantly? It could be, okay, I'm gonna put an example of that. And actually, what I think, and one of the things I want to demonstrate with my work is that there are community of practices that don't uh, don't need central. Okay, I'm gonna put my ideas in order. Community of practice is a very helpful concept because you don't have to need you don't need the proximity of the same location just to construct, you know, a community or to share or to construct the case of the internet. That's in the case of people, you know, watching YouTube videos, and that's what I want to demonstrate. Again, not very much people talk about this as part of necessarily of the queer linguistics theoretical baggage, but I do because I do think there is something significantly important to aggregate. This concept aggregates to queer linguistic research. So, and queer praise, as I said, they are very important pieces. And one of the most influential is this one from Rosie Barrett. Rosie Barrett, an American linguist or queer linguist, is maybe one of the most, for me at least, uh, more amazing theorist of queer linguistics. So in this concept, he's complicating this concept of speech community. So I won't, dive into in his arguments, but he proposed another way to think on speech, on communities, people talking together, because he put in the center the special situation of, queer speakers, because, one of his arguments said, well, nobody actually wants their kid to sound gay, right? So we have to think again, what we understand about linguistic socialization, what is a speech community actually works for when we talk about, LGBT speakers. Um, so he proposed a homogeneous speech community instead. It's a very, very nice piece. So this is later. This is in an encyclopedic entry titled Queer Talk. In contrast to sociolinguistic frameworks focusing on norms of language variation that categorize individuals into speech communities based on identity categories, that is like, okay, so you are working class, you may talk similarly, or you are a woman, you may talk similarly. Or the same for queer people, like, okay, you all are lesbians, or you all are transgender women. So I assume that's something in common you have to, share in your verbal behavior. It's the other way around, as I said. Queer linguistics assume that speech communities are prototype categories that don't have clearly definable boundaries. And actually, he goes a step further in the classic piece, saying like we are constantly we are simultaneously in different speech communities, or like homogeneous communities at the same time. So this is an interlude before entering to my actual work. So these are some pieces that I really recommend. Queer Excursions. This is an edition, it's a volume edited by Zeman, Davis, and Rocco. This is they talk about sexuality, non-binary speakers. There is a very interesting piece on Hebrew and non-binary speakers in Israel. Barrett, as I said, a great intellectual. This volume is, a compilation of all many of his works. He has a very first chapter dedicated to indexicality. I really recommend it. And one to African American drag queens, which is one of his most famous pieces. Also recommended. Professor William Leap published recently a book titled Language Before Stonewall, Language, Sexuality, History. And he proposed the concept of the perspective of historical queer linguistics. Yeah, and he's a big name in the area. I really recommend it. Very nice work. I won't dive into this. I'm just going to talk about my own stuff. So saying that, I'm going to start. I'm with the timer. Don't worry. So the first, so this is this is a work I did at the beginning of my doctorate. Queer as Lady Gaga occurs como Lagagis, performative and indexical work of Mexican YouTube video bloggers. So the following are the main characters of this story. This is Lagagis, a parodic character inspired by the world-famous singer Lady Gaga. According to her creator, Lagagis is tacky, crazy, popular. She's addicted to making people laugh and attracting their attention. And this is Eder Castillo, a young Mexican guy who lives in Ciudad Victoria, a city with a population of approximately 300,000 people in the northern state of Tamaulipas, in Mexico. Since the beginning of 2010 until August 2014, Eder and his friends have created more than 160 parodic videos in their YouTube account, frecuencia.com, frecuencia with a K and a Z, such as the following videos. Now, this is actual Judas from Lady Gaga. If you're a fan, you will get it. Okay. Bugas, which is a very special word in Spanish, in Mexican Spanish, is the only word that refers to straight people used by the LGBT population. So all the LGBT is like saying you, this heterosexual, right? So it's a very, as you see the similarities too, it's a very special word. So Married and I, Lady Gaga, a very cool video clip. And Matrimoniada con la Noche. So she's on a Walmart carrito with her friends, and they're like changing everything on the everything. So the work of this group of Mexican gay guys is a cultural, aesthetic, and discursive reinterpretation of Lady Gaga's video clips, which are the starting point of unexpected appropriations and interventions. Song titles, lyrics, plots, and characters were transformed through the lenses of gay and transsexual culture. Transgender culture of Ciudad Victoria. Lagagi's videos are a YouTube success. 11 of her videos have been played more than 100,000 times. Another 16 have been watched between 50 and 100,000 times. Eder and his friend have a limited budget. Close friends constitute the crew, and production technology is made with borrowed items and some homemade artifacts, as the carrito of Walmart. The goal of this project, my project, is to analyze the productive use of certain linguistic features as they are inserted by Eder Castillo, the performers, in various orders of indexicality. I'm going to explain this in a moment, allowing him to position himself critically with a complex space of gender identities. In this presentation, I will show the performative nature of Lagagi's linguistic innovations and phonetics and lexical levels. These innovations are first, the diffusion of assimilated production of the rhotic consonant R, so R, before a pause, which has a polyvalent indexical value in the Spanish spoken in Mexico. And second, the diffusion of the recently, not very much recently, when I wrote this, was kind of recent, coin word mujeres. I will show how through the semiotic process of indexicality, both linguistic innovations refer and construct a shared gender identity, which habilitates an audience of feminine gay men and transgender women who are particularly marginalized in Mexican society. So from the total, about the corpus, from the total of 165 videos of the YouTube channel, I have chosen the 35 most played videos, which have been watched more than 40,000 times. I focus on those that show the highest rate of assimilated R, and the word weirds, either as part of the songs or non-musical verbal interactions. Both phenomena are prominent for two reasons. First, the clear deviation from the standard Spanish is very prominent if you know Spanish. And second, their unsystematic and scarce occurrence. In the following, I will describe both phenomena, and then I will establish connection between the sociolinguistics literature and my own findings in order to shed some light on their social meaning. Okay? So about assimilated R, R sibilar. In the corpus, the assimilation of R always occurs before a pause. The sound is voiceless. Okay, maybe this is very technical. So the sound is a voiceless alveopalatal fricative. So my sociophonetics colleagues can help me later. Its length is strikingly prominent, very long. Even considering that its internal context is constrained, its occurrence could not be predicted in the speech of Lagagis. Because it's very conscious, its use. I localize and transcribe two excerpts of the corpus to illustrate this sound. The first one is from a video of July of 2010. It is a parody of the video clip Paparazzi and Alejandro from Lady Gaga. The second excerpt is from a video released in August of 2012. This is the latter is a parody of the interlude of the Monster Ball tour. It's a gif that Lady Gaga made some years ago. So don't worry if you miss the sound. I'm gonna show it in the transcription. Sorry.
Éramos tan jóvenes y tú tan pasiva, Alejandro. Pero aún así me hacías volar, disfrutar, gozar. Eras mi amor, mi motor. Ale Alejandro. Jota, la manina nos quiere matar. Hay que escapar. Ya no puedo rimar. Así viste de panochona gorda. Ni ha de ser verdad lo de Manina Calixta. Es más, te dije que le pagaras para que ya dejara de bufar. Ahora, ¿qué vamos a hacer? Ya sé. Vamos a empezar a cantar.
Okay, so we were so young and you were such a button in feminine form, Alejandro, but you made me fly, enjoy, indulge. You were my love, my motor, Alejandro. So here is the assimilated R. So my first thoughts, okay, let me see. Okay, so this is the Joder, sorry. Jota, which is a way to refer among gay men in Mexico. La Manina wants to kill us. We should run away. I cannot write anymore. Well, you can read the rest. So my first thought about Lagagi's use of erre was that it refers to a stereotype shared in Mexican society. In this sense, I formulated the following question. What social meanings are associated with the use of erre, assimilated R, in the Spanish spoken in Mexico? Something's going on there. In order to answer it, I formulated another two questions. First, is the use of erre, assimilated R, distributed by gender? And second, is the use of assimilated R a phonetic trait employed by Mexican gay men? The quantitative research of the use of erre in Mexico does not always doesn't always focus on gender as social variable that influences its distribution. Nevertheless, some generalizations could be drawn from the existing literature. Dorothy Riesel in 1989 found out that the upper and middle class women of the city of San Luis Potosí in Mexico pronounce significantly more than men of the same social classes. The author, Riesel, concludes that women seem to lead linguistic change and that men related to more traditional professions and activities assimilate even less than their gender peers. Furthermore, the study of Matos Mendoza of 2004, made in the city of Moroleón, Guanajuato State, shows a clear preference for assimilated R among working class women. She suggests that these women seek symbolic power in terms of Bourdieu in a society that they are not economically acknowledged and upward mobility is hard to attain. So the whole thing about prestige prestige. So from a diachronic perspective, the work of Serrano of 2008 concludes that the use of R is decreasing in Ciudad de Mexico because it occurs it occurred less in 21st century in comparison to the 60s, to the 1960s. On the other hand, contrasting the compiled bibliography on this subject, Serrano found out that women tend to use R more than men, while the distribution of women and men's use of of assimilated R was 2:1 in 1969. I mean, like you have the proportion is women to men 2:1 in 1966. Later in 2001, the proportion was 5:1. So women, men. In other words, the sound was pronounced less, while it was more feminized. The author claims that this change explains why assimilated R is becoming a stereotype of female speech, or anyway, an effeminate speech. In sum, assimilated R is used among upper class and middle class. It seems that assimilated R is used among upper and middle class women and those who want to attain upward mobility. Unsurprisingly, sexual orientation was not considered relevant in these variational studies. So this is a variable that is started to get included in the last decade. So this is not very surprising. However, a recent sociolinguistic research on the phonological variation in the speech of Mexican gay men allowed me to understand the patterns of use of assimilated R within this population. Eller, author of Sociolinguistics of Mexican Gay Spanish, Phonic Variation, Stereotypes, Belief, and Attitudes in a Social Network of Gay Men. So that's the name of the book that was published in 2013, which is based on her master thesis, has analyzed the speech of 21 overtly gay men from 18 to 45 years old, and mostly from the Federal District of Mexico. Her corpus is made up of participants' spontaneous speech and the readings of text and word lists. It's very, Lamovian style. Eller found out that these gay men assimilated the R before a pause 70% of the time. In contrast, the general population, meaning gay and non-gay speakers altogether, everybody only assimilate the R 13%, 17, 13 in this very linguistic context. Additionally, Eller points out that lower middle class gay men have a marked gay speech, that's the category that she created for this study, are most likely to assimilate R before a pause. Lower and lower middle class gay men. For her, marked gay speech is defined as an intonation different from straight Mexican speakers and from non-marked gay men. And I find actually very secular this definition, kind of problematic, but the study is very, very interesting. Then it seems that Mexican gay men tend to use assimilated R prominently. This observation could fit with the aforementioned study of Serrano that states that this phonetic trait is becoming a stereotype of feminine speech or effeminate speech. I think that my two former questions has been answered. That is the use of assimilated R distributed. The use of assimilated R is distributed by gender, and is the use of assimilated R a phonetic trait employed by Mexican gay men? So the answer is yeah. It's a very. It seems that it's used more by women and gay men. However, my purpose is to inquire about the social meaning and the performative value of this sound, not only to sketch its patterns of distribution. I will use the theoretical concept of indexicality. So here I go with indexicality in order to figure out the social meaning at stake. So a linguistic variant does not only function to refer to a situation of the outside world. Okay. Furthermore, linguistics variation plays a pivotal role in the construction of social identities. It indexes social meanings related to the speakers, his interlocutor and the communicative context. For instance, the non-standard word cantar with a simulated R undoubtedly refers to particular actions and indexes at first glance the speech of lower-class gay men and upper and middle-class women of Mexico. This semiotic process is called indexicality, and it operates at different levels. According to the theoretical approach of Silverstein, the first order of indexicality takes place when an outsider, such as variationist linguists, I quote, establish a kind of correlation between a form and a socio-demographic identity or pragmatic function, end quote. The speakers are not conscious of this sociolinguistic correlation or distribution. In this case, the use of a simulated R will be correlated both to working class gay men and middle class women of Mexico and the first level of indexicality. So the second order of indexicality occurs when the speakers notice, consciously or not, the first order correlation and start to use it to do social work, I quote, social work, either interpretive or performative, giving, end quote, giving social meaning to the patterns of linguistic variation. By social meaning, I refer to the as Silverstein said, ideologically driven metapragmatics. That is, the value judgment about the language in use. In this vein, I consider that Lagagis links the patterns of use of assimilated R with the values of femininity and upward mobility, because his persona or this character is all the time trying to be fancy and middle class and cosmopolitan. I argue that such ideological association puts aside the correlation with socio-demographic and sexual identities. The Mexican gay men, either among them, employ assimilated R not to imitate women, but to incorporate femininity and the will of upward mobility in their gender construction. Consciously or unconsciously, that's not a matter in this moment. In other words, assimilated R indexes lifestyle, not speakers. And we think also, I mean, I'm trying also to emphasize, I wrote this a long time ago, so I'm thinking like, you know, correcting some part of this, but again, if we think on language traits or features as affordances that people use to construct their identity, to stylize their identity, you can like, we can see in from other perspectives instead of like assigning or correlating a linguistic practice with a socio-demographic identity. We see like a plethora of affordances or resources to construct their identity, which is, you know, which are circulating in, you know, our daily life, in media and social networks, etc. So looking closely to Eder Castillo's first videos, I found further evidence that supports my argument. The debut of Eder was in the speech of Carrie Bradshaw, the parodic character inspired by Carrie Bradshaw from the world-famous show Sex and the City. Eder appeared in the work couture as a rephonologized version of the French loanword haute couture. Sorry, my French. At the second order of indexicality, the brand new word couture indexes the lifestyle of cosmopolitan and wealthy women who is a fashion forward and appreciates designer clothing. So this area is assimilated R is not only in Lagagis, but in another persona constructed by Eder Castillo. Although Eder removed coutures from his repertoire, the ideologies of cosmopolitanism and femininity still remain and came off from their lexical root along with the simulated R. You know, it was the first time that appeared Eder, you know, after this long war, and then Eder was used in other instances and environments. Then simulated R was productively added to other words, as I showed above, carrying the social meaning assigned at the second order of indexicality. Yeah. So the other word is muyers. I'm worried I don't have enough time, but I do. The other linguistic item of Lagagis register that I will explore is the word muyers. So the following excerpt is from Bugas, which is a parody of Judas, released in May 2011. It is the most watched video. in the channel. The word buga means straight in the gay slang of Mexico. In contrast with the common lexical practice, buga is a word used exclusively by transgender, lesbian, and gay people to refer to heterosexual persons, which is a very weird, that is very rare word, because you have like dozens and dozens of words to refer to gay and lesbian and transgender people, but you don't have words more than heterosexual to refer to straight people. And this is a very special case. That's a footnote. Furthermore, the other excerpt is from Peluca, Parody of Hair, another video. It was released a year later and it's less popular, but it's cool then. So here we go. Okay, so here's the so mujeres, again, this is no mujeres, it's mujeres. I'm going to explain this in a moment. Here you go, jotears. So my search of the meaning of the word in academic sources was unsuccessful, of course, because people don't pay much more attention to gay people or like to YouTube in academia. I hope that changed soon. Then, as an outsider of this community of practice, I try to infer the meaning of mujeres from the context of the given, from the context given by Lagagi's videos. So I was like watching all these videos, trying to what is this mujer thing? Sounds like mujer, but it's not. I was more sure that what mujer does not mean than what it actually does. So this recently coined word does not refer to women, neither to men exactly. It is not used to define straight people, but is closely related to jotas or jotos. The popular Mexican word joto refers to homosexual men, and it's commonly used in a derogatory way to depict as fearful or coward. Within corpus, I have come across a feminized version of this word, jota, which functions as an in-group label. So Lagagi's usage to refer to her audience, her friends, and herself, jota. In the lyrics of Peluca, she proudly, you can see that there in the screen, she proudly claims, I am weird. Yo solo quiero jotear, detaching the negative connotation of the original word. Since I need to confirm my hypothesis, I decided to interview Eder Castillo by video call. So I was like, using my Facebook, and it was some years ago, so my face also changed. So, so he told me about the first time he heard about the word weird. It was long before he created Lagagis, a middle-class lesbian friend of him from a smaller city, taught him in order to sound really weird that he had to add a whistle after every verb. That's the actual words of Eder. He said that he hears it. He said that he hears more in the speech of feminine working class gay guys. This insider's observation coincide with the. Sorry, I lost. Yeah. When I asked Eder about the kind of youngster that used this whistle, this whistle after every verb, and could be late, he said that he hears it, this whistle more in the speech of feminine working class gay guys. This insider's observation coincides with the findings of Eller's study, that gay men assimilate more than the population, the overall population. After a while of talking, I mentioned to Eder the stereotype elaborated in Mexico around the use of assimilated art as part of feminine speech. In his sarcastic opinion, he said the sound is produced because these old women tend to use, these middle-class women tend to use dental prostheses. In other words, while Eller does not correlate the use of assimilated R with the socio-demographic identity of women, instead he made a joke about it. He does see its correlation with working-class gay men. So, yeah, this is evidence that the lexical semiotic process operates at a second order, attributing the values of femininity and upward mobility or middle class to persons regardless of their socio-demographic identity. And in brief, and I close to the mass. Muyers is an in-group neologism that refers to effeminate gay men. I argue that this lexical innovation, led by Lagaguis, is an intervention of the Spanish word for woman, mujer. In this alteration, the final R is replaced by the cluster of an almost retroflex approximant. So this is I'm sorry, I don't remember where the transcription in conventions are from, but I use the same of this author earlier. The final R is replaced by the cluster of an almost retroflex approximant R and a subsequent voidless sibilant apical S. So that it sounds like Earth. It is relevant to question why Muyers has a final R's and not an S. Why the outcome of this intervention in Muyers and is Muyers and not Muyers? Where does the consonant cluster Earths come from? Okay, so nowadays I won't make that kind of question. They will be more subtle, but okay, you get the point. According to Eller's work on the Spanish spoken by Mexican gay men, Earth has not appeared in the spontaneous speech of her interviewees. However, the author found this phonetic trait in two closely related communicative events. First, in the mocking and exaggerated speech of the gay characters of Mexican comic shows. And second, in the metalinguistic comments of some interviewees, of some of these men, these participants, who state that they use Earth deliberately to achieve a playful effect when they are together with other gay peers. So, in other words, you have the TV shows making a stereotype of gay men, and then the actual gay men using it. So, what's going on here? As one of the participants points out, to use this sound is like becoming jota with the words to differentiate from the speech of men and women. No, so that was a metalinguistic comment on that. I found out that apparent contradiction here. The aforementioned Mexican comedians are straight. I mean, it seems that they're straight. And the collaborators of Eller study are gay. Notwithstanding this difference, our Earth is consciously used and interpreted by all these male speakers. This seeming paradox could be cleared up applying, I think, applying the analytical concept of indexicality. While assimilated R indexes linguistic ideologies as a second order, this rhotic plus sibilant has been exploited at a third order of indexicality. So the answer here is for like, well, this now not going to happen, and something else happened. So here it goes. The third order of indexicality, again following Silverstein and Barbara Johnston, occurs when a correlation of a linguistic use with a socio-demographic identity gives place to highly, I quote, reflexive performance, end quote, that index local identities, I quote, often in ironic, semi-serious ways. The use of arts or arts appeals to a stereotype of gay men's speech, which is shared widely in Mexican society and media, but is unlikely in the actual speech. It is unlikely to appear in the actual, conversation of a gay man. In contrast with Hergé, the emergence of Earths is localized in the realm of mass communication and indexes a social meaning, in particular gayness at the third level. So I argue, and I close in here, I have some extra minutes. I wanted to present something else, but I'm gonna do some, some part of this just to complement this work. I argue that Lagrange is constructing a polyphonic identity when deploying the indexical potential of Earths and network with Earth. So Lagrange make use of all these repertoire, all these resources. Polyphonic identity is a concept coined by Rossi Barrett, or Barrett. I don't remember how to pronounce his last name. In his work on African American drag queens performances, polyphonic identity, and refers to the indexical work that takes place when diverse linguistic variables are used to create a voice associated with multiple identities simultaneously. So in this study made in the Texas gay bar, Rossi Barrett was one of the spectators, he recorded some of these African American drag queens, and he noticed that they use what is called women's language by Robbie Lakoff, some traits of white middle class women. Also, some features of African American vernacular English, etc., etc. So just to create this like kind of dissonant character, right? Like using elements from different identities. So polyphonic identity, that's the word. Okay, so Lagrange's voice indexes the actual use of R, you see letter R, the ideologies attached to that for the second order, the ideologies of cosmopolitanism, middle class, and the stereotypical use of art, rhotic plus sibilant arts, third order. In other words, her polyphonic voice conflates the way the Jota sound, how they want to be perceived, consciously or unconsciously, and what the society expects from them. So I put this in the table here in the screen. You can see. So indexed social meaning in the right hand, in the left. So yeah, this is my study. But since I have 5 more minutes, I'm okay, right? I want just to present some extra data. So I won't read. I have like 10 more pages here. Whatever. So later I start to I start to getting curious about how people use these warm years in Twitter. So well, you have all these arguments, and so these are the characters that I was mentioning. So la maniwis and la perejil and la jitomata, so they're feminine, I suppose gay characters, performed by not necessarily gay men, gay actors, and they use arts, like the rhotic plus the sibilant all the time. So so why on earth I put Top Cat here? I'm going to explain in a moment. So this is, as you know, many of the movies in Latin America are dubbed in Mexico. So this is a scene that is very interesting, and I found it very interesting. I'm gonna play it again. I know that I have like 3 minutes. No, don't worry.
¿Tiene algo más exclusivo que primera clase? Pues la clase magnate. Es como primera clase, pero puede descansar sus patitas en alguien de clase turista. ¡Cállese los ojos! Y olvídese de Florida. Voy a Roma, Italia. ¡Sí, señor! Clase magnate.
So this is the translation. At the end, what I just want you to notice that this employee said, "Sí, señors." And I wrote this. In this scene, an enthusiastic and horrid top cat asks for a seat in the most exclusive section of the plane. The attendant is a well-groomed, cheerful man whose gestures, chin up and limp wrist, as well as his oscillating intonational curve, suggest effeminacy and gayness. At the end of the scene, Top Cat makes a decision to which the employee responds, "Sí, señor, señor." Sorry, señor. Okay. there are sociolinguists in the room, so I won't, interfere with the data. The brief appearance of arts in the speech of this secondary character, along with his with his body language and suprasegmental features, leave no room for doubt. The audience must interpret him as a gay man. Yeah, so this was made by voice actors in Mexico. So I understand that there was some, lexical work made by the voice actors. How much time I have? Like 2 minutes?
Ernesto, no problem. You can talk a bit longer. We don't have such a strict sort of such
oh, thank you so much. Because I put so much effort on this. Okay, so I was thinking, well, what's going on here? So I'm gonna continue with my argument. So all these, previously I showed that the neologism mujeres plays a key role in the construction of some Mexican gay men's gender identity. I explore and apply the concept of indexicality to my findings. I said that the arts variant of the multiple vibrant phoneme is not just another phoneme, but indexes, it's not just another form, sorry, but indexes identities, stereotypes, and ideologies. I also conclude that the use of mujeres is a performative metalinguistic practice that functions in the third order of indexicality. Yeah, so here's what I'm interested here. Okay, sorry. So the third order occurs when the conscious correlation between a linguistic use and the socio-demographic identity give rise to highly reflexive performance. So in the case of one of the study I read directly was the one of Barbara Johnston's. She has a very interesting study on the speech of the people from Pittsburgh. So I haven't been in Pittsburgh, but what she said is that people in Pittsburgh are very conscious about the way they speak. So they are not only, aware of that, but also they create like word lists and they create, marks with, this word is from Pittsburgh. I feel like they are creating these courses around this association, this third order of indexicality. Okay, so let's go back to mujeres. As I point out, art is not only used to construct the stereotype of the effeminate gay man on television, but it's also employed parodically by actual gay men. So I said that. So using Google's advanced search tool, I found out that the first online record of mujeres in internet, I have spent a lot of time in internet, whether spelled with a final Z or an S, dating back from October 2005, is a case of self-identification, people using it for talking about themselves. So there you have, I'm gonna put the translation in a moment. So, so this is an entry from the blog Viaje al Sureste de México by Rodolfo Ambardo. Let's say divine friends, women and men. No? One of our two nosy ones. Like every couple, mujeres, so that's the word. We start this journey as Mexicanas, always forgetting last-minute details. This is an entry. Okay, yeah. Here, the word Mexicanas in feminine is employed to refer to themselves, and it's a good example of what is called in some queer linguistic research as inverted appellation. Furthermore, mujeres apparently function as a synonym of gay. Although later I will problematize this. So they're happy there. Yeah. Because of this performative potential, mujeres has been incorporated into the linguistic repertoire of several Mexican gay video bloggers. So footnote, I wrote this like 2 years after I made my study on Larabi. So much more start to happen after that. Because of this performative, the video bloggers has become popular in other social networks as YouTube. So here is La Precious, which is a parody of Precious, the movie, and La Mujeres, so this is, if you like YouTube videos in Spanish, you will get it. queer videos. So I will only focus on Twitter. I want to delineate the social medias much less what I did before. I have somebody. Okay. Oops, sorry. I'm getting confused with all this. So why Twitter? Why is so interesting in Twitter? I think everybody can like, take advantage of this reflection because this is a quote from Lauren Squires. She worked on the circulation of new lexicon for American TV shows on Twitter. From TV to Twitter. She summarized the potential of social of studying Twitter. Twitter is a significant site of colloquial linguistic exchange for those who use it, and because of its frequent use as an interface for responding to and commenting on and increasingly producing popular culture, it provides a especially useful site in which to investigate the function and circulation of media language. So what is interesting, just to reinforce the idea, is that you can get like non-standard forms, like from one day to the other. I mean, if something is getting popular or trendy, you will get it like in matters of minutes in Twitter. Also, it reflects or like shows the speech of subcultures or like people who have, of course, they have access to internet, and I thinking more here in young people, very young people, LGBT speakers, etc. So, how much time do I have? If you give me 5 more minutes, it's fine.
Yeah, 5 more minutes.
5 more minutes. Okay, great. Because I don't want also to talk too much because I'm getting, I'm getting dry. But yeah, I didn't calculate very well this. Okay, but I choose Mujeres with Z instead of Zeta because Z instead of S because it's more. There is no significance in between S and Zeta, S and Zeta in Mexican Spanish, not even in American Spanish. It doesn't matter. It only works in in some places as Spain, but not in many communities. So I think that people working with people using the hashtag Mujeres with a Z are more like doing some more indexical work. People working with Mujeres with S. So the numbers of tweets include the hashtag is more prominent in Mujeres with Zeta, and the oldest hashtag with. Okay, so. Although tweets are very short, they can only contain up to 140 characters. They are all stored and their authors can be identified. It is also possible to know minute by minute when tweets were posted, how they interact with other tweets, and thanks to geotags, we can know where they were created. So the corpus is there. I collect this from March 21st. Of 2006 when Twitter was created through April 19 of 2017 when was the last night before the presentation of this work. The total corpus is 19,000 tweets. So all the nitty-gritty is in the screen. So what about the hashtags? Any group of letters typed after hashtag symbol onto the next blank space becomes a clickable hashtag. This action takes us to a page where all public tweets that include the same group of letters are displayed. Well, this is not new for everybody, for any with some familiarity with Twitter, but I just explained it. So hashtags are used to signal public figures, hashtag Lady Gaga, places, hashtag Peru, causes, hashtag Black Lives Matter, or events, hashtag Gay Pride March. Hashtags are organizing elements of information that any Twitter user can propose directly using their account. So it's like a directory, like clicking and you're connected. Some have millions of items, some others have a few hundred, as in the case of Mujeres, hashtag Mujeres. This connectivity makes it possible to identify the polyvalent meanings of this neologism in a chronological way. So now I stop reading and I'm going to present briefly my findings. So yeah, for self-identification, people use it to self-identify. So because I'm weird, I just arrived with mis chacales y mis princesas. So chacales is a man, it's a working class man that you pay for sex. It's like gay for pay kind of image in Mexican society. So Cuquita Preciosa, Feliz Dia de los Inocentes, Happy April's Fool. Do you think I'm very macha? Do you think I'm male? Or no? If I wear lencha, I'm not a lesbian. I'm mujer, so mucha honra. So it's interesting that people, or these characters or this persona who seems apparently a feminine, use it. They are making also difference with, with princesses, with other identities. I don't understand exactly what's going on here, but it's like in between identities, not gay exactly, not feminine, something parodic maybe. You can see also in the very same name of these authors, La Mujer Ninfómana, Cuquita Preciosa, etc. Substances and lifestyles. So nunca pensé, or I never thought I would say this, but I'm really fascinated about my shoes, my new shoes. I love them. Hashtag Mujeres. So this is a very common use of hashtag, like commenting what you just wrote before. And so this is Kevin, aerobics all day, pro fitness, hashtag Mujeres, like saying that, okay, I'm doing, I'm taking care of our body, I'm doing like this sort of gay lifestyle, etc. So I find it also like trying to figure out what's going on here, and I understand that they are commenting what they put before. Like I wrote kind of define these norms of hegemonic masculinity in the case of Kevin. And Gabriela, I think that she's like kind of replying like, okay, I don't like shoes, but this is very interesting because this is very shocking because I really love them. So maybe it's something like, embracing femininity, etc. So Odin, so this is basically saying, oh, you are mujer, so you cannot like play fool with me. Okay. So I just want to end with this video, and you can read what the guy is gonna say.
¿Listos para la marcha en Nogales, Sonora? ¡Yay! Tenemos que luchar por los derechos de los niños, de que crezcan con una mamá y con un papá. Es su derecho y nosotros no se lo podemos quitar.
So the young man records his participation in a march against gay marriage in Sonora, Mexico. Instead of producing the voiceless palatal fricative che, again, sociophonetics, which is the canonical one, he does it as a voiceless fricative sibilant, no, luchar. A variant that is common in the north of the country and that is indexically associated, so less investigated, with the speech of gay men in Mexico. Faced with the conflict between the homophobic message and the apparently gay repertoire of this guy, Frank, a Twitter poster, comments, esta pinche jota inventada que pretende la ridícula. I just want to read it aloud. So what is this this gay guy he's pretending to do? He looks or she looks ridiculous. So there, in this comment, he parallels the pronunciation of the video by associating it with a speech of Jotas in group term, you know that, to emphasize that he is a mujer. So that's why hashtag. Indeed, he's a lady Lushona. These outings are because, like signaling you are a gay man, but you are hiding your sexuality. So that's kind of one of the other functions of mujeres, and to position themselves as trusted observers who can see the authentic identity of others. Thank you so much. I've run out of time, but thank you.
Thank you very much, Ernesto, for this wonderful presentation, which was at the same time theoretical and empirical. So the floor is now open for the questions. And I know that students have their questions. So first, Ernesto, can you please stop sharing?
Okay,
your
sharing. Okay,
presentation? Yeah.
no problem. Gracias, Eva.
I'm waiting for the first question.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. I think I'm the first one. Okay, first of all, I have to say that thank you so much for your presentation. I really found it really interesting. And okay, then let's go. What exactly does the new research field of queer linguistics encompass and investigate? Sorry about my English. I don't speak English perfectly. I hope you could
Inmaculada también puede repetir en español, no hay problema.
Ok,
Claro.
perfecto. Mejor en español, sí. Ok, quería preguntar, o sea, ¿qué abarca, o sea, qué investiga exactamente el nuevo campo de investigación de la lingüística queer?
Okay, well, what queer linguistics investigates is the construction of heteronormativity, regardless of, the subject of the community. It can be LGBT people, core communities, or straight, not necessarily heteronormative people. So, maybe, yeah, I should spend some time explaining what I talk about, what I refer about heteronormativity. So it's basically a set of ideas about that show heterosexuality and certain kind of heterosexuality as the more desirable, self-evident way of life, a way of living your life, And there are people who are queer, who are also straight, like people who, they deliberately don't want to have children. They are completely healthy, so they are, in these terms, they are queer. They don't follow, the norms of gender normativity towards women or families. Yeah, so it was more like it says, it says a critical approach to understand how heteronormativity is constructed. Yeah, I would say something like that. And also another keyword is anti-essentialist. It focuses on practices. And yeah, I think that. So Lucas said, I have another question. At the beginning, you talk about feminist and queer linguistics. Where could you see potential conflict between them? Not necessarily. But there was some discussion in the early 2000s between some scholars towards if there, I mean, the discussion is called the language, not the identity versus desire debate. I won't mention their names, they're all amazing scholars. But one of the more important points of the debate was to, how to define sexuality, and is such a different, matter than gender. So nowadays people won't be like that, sharp about saying, I mean, they won't like differentiate sexuality as another completely different sphere of social life than gender. People get into terms with the idea that are interlocked. That debate helped to, to revitalize, to invigorate, the theoretical framework. But I don't see it necessarily conflict. No.
Then I would have another question. First of all, thank you very much. And I really like that this research field is getting bigger and more attention. It's really important, I think. And I would like to know from you, what do you think, in which ways the queer linguistics will develop in the future? So what will they investigate, in which kind of way they might get bigger, or hopefully they get bigger, and how? Like, how can they get more attention in all kinds of fields of investigation.
Well, yeah, thank you. Thank you all for your claps. So the good thing about gender, language, and sexuality research, if we call it feminist linguistics or queer linguistics, it's not a point in this, what I want to say in this moment, is that all these research groups and these networks of investigation and journals are very aware about the necessity of cultural diversity, of more multilingual approaches to more linguistic diversity too. So just to mention, what is the future? I don't know. But there are kind of promising paths towards what is coming. So for instance, there is a last kind of encyclopedic entry written by Hirajo Rodrigo Borba, whom I mentioned in the first part, and I'm sorry if I confuse the last name, Hiramoto. So they show that there is a long tradition of research of general language in Japanese and in Brazilian Portuguese in Brazil. And also is getting more diverse in my part of the world, Latin America. So I think as many, feminist inspired disciplines, they're very aware that we cannot stay, or the knowledge has to be, I mean, the different voices around the planet has to be represented, So more and more, there are more studies on, how queer people speak in Africa, how queer people speak, in Latin America. But Latin America is kind of very well mapped. And transgender ethnography on transgender communities, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm very positive about the coming years, and I think having these three amazing scholars as editors of Gender and Language Journal is a good step for this, for this approach for diversity, linguistic diversity, cultural diversity. Yeah. I really, not like somebody said, like American optimism is contagious, but I think very kind of optimistic. Yeah.
Thank you very much for the question and for the answer, for the optimistic answer. Further questions from the group of students?
I have one.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you again for the lecture. My question is, are there other domains or contexts where queer linguistic practices are exercised, such as through commercial products, or is it mostly right now kind of mainstream media or things of the like you focused on?
So are you asking about what I investigate, or what other kind of studies are?
What you investigate, but also like overall trends, like what you've maybe noticed throughout your investigations as well, or just through
Yeah.
everyday life.
I think the question was about commercialization, right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Commercial aspects of indexicality.
Yeah.
Okay, just talking about commercialization of the research, or like doing like commodification of the language of queer people.
No. I think Hannah means the commercialization of these features, like Mouillard's other T-shirts, maybe with this word or something like that.
Yeah.
Like the mug in Pittsburgh, the mug in Pittsburgh that you mentioned.
Okay, I got it.
Mugs, T-shirts,
I mean, that many innovations of the mainstream society comes from the margins, and then is co-opted, and then it's getting popular, and then you know, is not so much popular, and then people forgotten. So that's something that happened a lot in American society. I kind of trace, not very much in my own country, or like no, I cannot recall in Latin America necessarily, like people instrumentalizing the speech of transgender people or drag queens, like as happened in English in America. But it's a sort of a tendency in some places, like uh, white performers or artists get inspired by black singers, and they're like, people think that they create all this art on all these, uh, words, and actually the story is more like a circulation from the margins towards the center. But I cannot recall a trajectory like that in my country or in Latin America. I don't I don't know. In this moment I cannot recall.
Thank you. Further questions? I'll have a look at the live chat. Nothing there yet.
Hola, ¿puedes oírme? ¿Sí?
Sí, claro.
Sí, vale. Yo sigo con la pregunta, how can phonetic changes in language take place through predominantly written online platforms? And how can predominantly written online platforms influence phonetic changes in language?
Oh, that's a very difficult question. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. My area is not very much phonetics, but what I see is okay. I understand that you're saying, like, yeah, because now we have like more and more information, more and more, people tweeting and creating content online. How that will like affect the actual, or not the actual, but the sound change, I don't know. But yeah, I don't have an answer for that. Sorry. But I would recommend a book. Not very much about that influence, but how orthography or non-standard forms are orthographic forms are trying to reflect or are negotiated to reflect certain non-mainstream identities, or no, not necessarily non-mainstream, but young cultures, etc. So Mark Seba has this very interesting work on spelling a society. That's the name of the book. But your question is very interesting. For instance, I think people reading like Molière's, how they will pronounce that if they never heard it, Well, Molière's, so if the logic doesn't, function there, well, there's no place to sound change, right? I mean, like, I don't know. But that's a very interesting question. Thank you.
More questions?
Hola, yo también tengo una pregunta y la voy a hacer en inglés. In your opinion, which research topic has not received enough or any attention?
Okay, that's that's a very good question. I think in general, social research has not paid. I mean, it depends. It depends of the country, depends of the landscape, of the political landscape. Also, there are restrictions, like institutional restrictions in terms of, academic budgets, etc. I mean, that question is interesting, but I will kind of posit the question in terms of in which countries and what cultures, what continent. I can talk about what's happening in Spanish. What I see is there is a long tradition in, I'll talk about my own experience and my own researches on transgender and travesti communities, but not necessarily has a linguistic anthropology approach. So there are many very aspects that are very telling aspects of what some researchers, uh, collect or gather in their field work, but they are not this data is not analyzed through the eye or through the perspective of linguistic anthropology or non-queer linguistics. So I think more like not is not. I think the question is more about where are the linguists, right? Like more that what topic is not well studied yet or not explored yet. Is I think linguists has to like go a step further and trying to work in more organically in the social science. That's my opinion about what happened in Peru, at least. Yeah, there's a lot of to offer there.
Thank you. More questions? I have some too, but I will wait a little bit.
I know what you're asking. Am I Mexican? No, I'm not. Why are you so obsessed with Mexican YouTube? And I never been in Mexico. I only been one. I've been once. I lost one flight and I was lost in Benito Juarez Airport like for 10 hours. It was horrible. The experience was horrible. The people is very nice. Are very nice. But yeah.
Actually, we talked about a Peruvian who studies in New York and who dedicates himself to Mexican platforms and whose surname is Cuba. So it's a great combination. Okay, so if there are no questions, I would like to make some. I was very inspired by your lecture, your talk with such a rich material. And one thing I'm thinking about at the moment is this intersection of lower classes, like low-class women would distinct themselves, so to say, as well as lower working class gay, at least at the origin of this phonetic features. And it looks like there is some kind of distinction. Distinction is usually associated with upper classes, something which was that was investigated by Bourdieu. But there is also this other distinction of working classes. Is there anything about that in your thesis? Any explanation about this sort of distinction of the working classes?
In my thesis, so just to be clear, my thesis is not about this. This is a parallel project.
Or about in your research?
Okay. Yeah, I haven't explored. I mean, I'm yet in the collection data phase of my dissertation. Yeah, I mean, social class is a very important factor to have in mind, and kind of yeah, like drive the adoption or also the rejection of certain features, right? So in my what I see is that it's not every time somebody. I'm thinking more on trans or people like Lagares, who's more like Lagares can be like defined as extraordinary speaker because he's not reflecting somebody or a community, or not reflecting, but he's not a representative of somebody special. It's also I wrote that one part is an iconic speaker because people are watching all her videos, and kind of like he's disseminating the use of these mullers and all these sounds. But what happened with parody in this case is that is basically the critique of the camp, the camp culture, like showing something that it seems a very okutu, or like very sophisticated, by showing how artificial is that. At the end looks tacky and constructed. So it's a very unintended political stance there. For the case of Lagagis, social class has, I think, sort of this camp component there. Because this guy is not like trying to, first, yeah, he's all these things that he uses, like some stuff that he found, like, from her friends, from his friends, and all these references are very are American TV shows and Lady Gaga herself. But he doesn't pretend to be anything but a copy of a copy, like a parody of that. So that's for humor, but behind that, I think there are some political message that you can do, like you can have like some pesos and do like a very cool video clip with your friends. And I think that is, I mean, social class is, yeah, it's very interesting. It's a very interesting question, because they are not like pretending to be, the final project of a course. It's not that. I mean, it's very, but it's also very intended, right? But it's not. It's very do it yourself. It's very, yeah. I thinking that, yeah, maybe there is a critique on that, and also there are some messages in the lyrics, saying like things like soy jota, jotear, me gusta jotear. So these things of using the words that were used to insult gay men and trans women to to celebrate their identities. I think that's something that that is very an aspect that I'm reflecting now. um, is intertwined with this parody. Yeah.
Thank you. Another question is, or another something to take into consideration, I think, is also that this performative aspect is really is visible in almost all of your samples. So that I thought about something like scenic speech, which is traditionally something very, very prone to this third order, like indexicality, where you will exaggerate, as you said, will be playful, etc. Maybe there, it is also a something to consider, this scenic setting. Yeah, scenic, like performative, scenic, scenico, I guess, no? In this sense.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, I mean, it depends also what we as linguists try to investigate, right? Because if we have this tradition of looking for the more prototypical speaker of certain community, but I don't know how prototypical is a drag queen, right? Like in the case of Rusty Barrett or like Lagai, she's not a prototype of anything. And so, yeah, this is, as I said, that he or she is a iconic speaker. She's a sort of extraordinary speaker because she plays a lot with the third order of indexicality. Yeah, thank you. I'm gonna yeah, I think also that for us as linguists, we have to, we should like, I'm not implying that we don't do this, but for the new coming linguists in the room, for the younger generations, look also for like for people doing this sort of performances and kind of on stage. And you don't have to go to a gay bar to do that. There's some more and more research on YouTube. For instance, transgender transgender vloggers with a V, talking about the gender transitions and yeah. So more and more this idea of community again we have to complexify, because in internet it gets very relative. I mean, I start like looking for the geotags on this Twitter, in this Twitter post of Muyers, and it was like, well, it was everywhere. Of course, it was much more in Mexico territory, but it was like sometimes for other places. Yeah, so I think it's also very important to keep in mind while we talk about representation, community, and practice. Yeah.
Muchas gracias.
Gracias.
Yeah, we have more more questions. Ulrike?
Yeah, thank you very much. I was very impressed to see that you could actually show a whole indexicality development from first order to third order. That was very great. And you said in this very nice table that you had indexical semiotic process. And also when you commented on that, you said that the new form was actually originally used by female middle class and even upper middle class speakers, and then was taken over by working class gay men. Do I remember this correctly? Is that the development?
Yeah, I thank you. So as I said, I wrote this some years ago, and it's like reading now, it's like giving some cringe. I'm not saying like some people do like, oh, I hate my work. Oh no, I'm so ashamed of what I did. No, I mean like I recognize that there are some problematic things here, and the problematic thing in that statement that I've read is that I haven't checked at the time. I was like, well, okay, everything it was okay in 2017. Maybe it's okay now, but it's not. So the problem with that thing, if we phrase it in that way, you didn't, I did, is that it seems like there is some chronological order or like some theological aspiration. So we don't know. I mean, I wouldn't say, I mean, I will correct that and write like, not necessarily one is after the other. Is jumping to conclusions. Yeah, but there is not enough data in chronological terms to say something like that. I nowadays I wouldn't say something like this. I would say something like there is some coincidence, but I wouldn't put like step one, step two.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I was actually very impressed with this. I wasn't planning to criticize it. I was just planning to ask some more questions, you know. But if you think that it's probably not exactly a chronological order, then maybe my question isn't really a good one. But I'll still ask. If let's say it's true, I don't know, that this form used to be popular with female middle class speakers. Have you ever heard that in the meantime, maybe female middle class speakers becoming aware of their form being hijacked by different groups, that they are stepping away from that? Or it's just people haven't done any research on that yet?
That's a very good question. I don't think it excludes the question, my reformulation. I will state like reformulating that and getting that question.
Well, I mean, honestly, you're not doing research on female middle class speakers, so I'm not expecting you to. I'm wondering whether you've heard about that, or if there's any.
No, I think like that only would happen if, you know, the distribution of the so the word here is contamination, right?
Okay.
So
If you say so.
No. So in some theory, like when something or a form or a name is associated, it start to get associated with, with some value or social identity that people don't like to get associated with, it start to get, getting less and less popular. So I thinking like in this case that will happen in this hypothetical case. But it will only happen if it goes to, I mean, is if female middle class women are conscious about such. No, if it goes to the second order of indexicality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think, yeah, I think that there is so much work needed on, using this kind of, that's the problem with variation. Sorry. This is the problem with variationism, like it doesn't explore the meta-linguistics or the attitudes of, there are some, of course, I'm not saying that, but there are some, yeah, I think that there is a lot of potential in applying indexicality, and all these orders of indexicality in variationist sort of studies, yeah. But
well, I'm happy with the answer. Thank you very much. It's that's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Gabriele?
It's fine. Ulrike did all of it with her questions. Thanks a lot.
She stole your question.
I just want to add that the concept
She was first.
Oh, no. Is there any question? Yeah, I want to add something. The concept of indexicality is, I think, I don't know how much. I mean, so now the question is for you. So how popular is this concept in the German academia, or like is something like it's more discussed in anthropology? Because
this is a very good question, because in German academia of people who work on English, we call them Anglicists. So I'm an Anglicist. This is a very popular concept at the moment. I'm not so sure about Germanists working on German, and for that purpose, I have to ask my colleague, whose question I stole.
Well, actually, I'm sure this concept is used in dialogue analysis, but there are also other concepts. Positioning, it's called, and probably the perspective is a bit different. It's a sort of a more inclusive, not coming from language, but coming from habitus. Yeah, as I understand what, for example, Arnulf Deppermann and his colleagues do. I myself use the term indexicality. I mean, I'm into the semiotics of grammar, and grammar per se is indexical. So to me, and I'm working in the Prussian tradition basically with all kinds of refinements and grammaticalization studies. It's not new to instrumentalize features to point to something that is first only found in situational contexts and then being loaded with this meaning and then being transportable to other contexts. So I think the concept is, I mean, it's a basic semiotic concept, isn't it? So it should be somewhere in linguistics about the special sociolinguistic issues you're talking about. I don't know much to be able to talk about that. So Motschenbacher, etc., probably are indicative that it is used. So I'd say.
And what about Romance? What is called Romance linguistics in Germany? Those who work with yes, critical sociolinguistics, political linguistics or politolinguistics, and feminist linguistics, discourse analysis, they do know, of course, but there are not so many of those of the representatives. And then there are people who work on other, of course, in other fields and with other concepts. But we do know the concept in Hanover. And thank you very much for your illustrations of indexicality.
But what about community of practice? I'm sorry, and now the you know la mesa se voltea.
Now you're the one who is asking questions. I would first like to ask if there is any more question from the audience. I think if there are none, then we might stop live streaming at this point, and then we can stay with you and ask, well, answer your questions and chat more.
Thank you.
So thank you very much, and bye-bye to everyone who's been watching us. Thank you for being with us.
Muchas gracias.
Yeah, so the live stream is now